Welcome to second part of Awesome Rising. We will continue on GitHub TUX series. This is this section. All points are described here. We will start with rc.lua. After that, continue with theme.lua, which mainly are used the fishlive library implemented in Awesome fishlive directory. So I opened our project in config Awesome and run NeoVim and open the rc.lua, the main configuration file, and we can look to this section first. In the first section there are the imports. For example, the layout machi is here, and the right side correspond with a directory in your Awesome project. So there are the directory layout machi, and the main file is called init.lua. Init.lua creates the definition of the library. So if, for example, I open our fishlive, there are the init.lua2, and there are the subcomponents which corresponds with these names on the right side. So if I return back, you can see that the library is present under the attribute machi, and all attributes, tables, functions, methods can be called by this attribute. So there are all imports. Fishlive is here, and we can continue with next. The line 50 activates the hotkeys. Hotkeys for next applications which are not part of API. It can be added and customize it. So if I opened Super Alt S, there are visible next applications, for example TUX, and in this case I have open Vim. You can see there are the Vim commands. It is activated by this line. You can add your plugins to the keys and can be present in this help. There are some defaults, for example for Firefox, Vim, and you can extend your pop-up for the other applications. Error handling part is in this section. The component for handling for all notifications is called Nocti. If you want to connect some signals to listen messages, notifications, or some requests or properties, you can use the function connect signal, and first parameter define, for example, the listening of request property. In this case, the request for display error is used, and we add the function which will be called if some display error will happen. And input parameters are message and startup. In this case, if display error is called, we called the notification function, which show the window with critical urgency with this described title and post the message from the input parameters. In this section are defined the public attributes. For terminal, I used two terminals, Alacrity and Kitty here, and you can define the editor. This editor is, for example, used if I press this button and there are shown the edit config here. So this edit config is using this editor command. Next, default keys are defined here. The super key mode 4 is under the attribute mode key. Mode 1 is alt key, so I called alt key, and control is control key. For all key bindings are used just this public variables. In the next section is request for default layouts. Default layouts are just the list of layouts which you want to use. It is a cycling of this list. If you look to the right corner, you can see the floating layout here. So we are present here, and if I cycling this layouts, next will be the center of work, and previous is suite tile. I'm using all these activated layouts. This is not about the default for each tag. Definition of default layout for each tag is part of theme.lua. There are the linkage to this section. So this is definitions of layouts, and you can use the key binding for cycling for each active tag. The most important part of this configuration file is the beautiful component. Beautiful component defines the theme, which is defined as the input argument. In this example is Multicolor Theme, and the method which has to introduce this multicolor theme is init. Internal model which is filled by this initialization process is called theme. This theme object is returned back in the last command in theme.lua and is part of this beautiful object here. So all arguments, functions which are defined for theme table are present inside this beautiful object too. So you can call your defined functions and parameters by beautiful object which corresponds with theme object. Mouse global bindings. This is this section. If you are present on the desktop or wallpaper, you can use the right button. It is number 3. 4 and 5 are for scrolling. So if I used scrolling up and scrolling down, you can see that the tag is changed, and the right button here is for X menu. Some people don't like this feature, so you can remove this part, for example, and you can use just toggling in the top part. This feature is implemented separately in theme.lua, so I can scroll here and it works too, but it is defined for tag list. The main biggest part are the blocks for key binding, for global key bindings of your keys, and the client key bindings. It is binding for applications which are present in the Windows. The global key bindings is defined in separated blocks. It is good practice to make more these blocks by some your business approach. For example, I have the personal of some keys, but the default keys which are present in default rc.lua are in next section. So you can look here that general of some keys from default rc.lua are here. Why? Because it is much more simple to merge the changes for rc.lua from default rc.lua. So my personal parts are separate. I have more blocks. For next layouts are in the next blocks. There are a lot of key bindings. It is not possible to describe here all possibilities. So I prepared a separate video for all key bindings and features which are used for multicolor project. The link is present inside this YouTube video. You can click and look to all specific features. In this video I describe the structure. The main part of this global key bindings definitions are the function or table which is called a key. A key has 3 or 4 sections. The first section is definition of key binding. The first part of this are modifiers. In this example, there is the super key, alt key in the combination with W. If you press this combination, this function is called, and the body of this function is here. You can see that the beautiful component is called, and my implemented function in theme.lua is implemented and called here. The last part of this function key is the description part, which is part of Ctrl Super S. You can see these descriptions and the group. So there is a description and the group of some. There is the alternative definition of this function. For tables in Lua, you can define the exact attributes which are used, and you can see that this alternative expression define the modifiers by this attribute and the mod key, and you can define the key group. It means in this example that any number can be pressed with super key, and this key group will be called as a description group here, and on press you define your function, and input attribute index correspond with your pressed key group. So if I, for example, start super 4, the index will be 4, and the appropriate selected screen and tag will be selected and visible. This whole block for global key bindings are handling the tags, view toggling, moving clients, activate more tags. So it is part of the key bindings video. Now we are on the second section for mouse and key bindings for a client. You can see that the instance is the client. It means for Windows, for applications which are running inside the Windows. In this part is the default key bindings for mouse for the active window. So now we are here, and there are the definitions for the mouse buttons. The one is the left button, the 3 is the right button. So I can press the super key and the left, and I can move the window, and the right key I can resize the window. So it is defined here. There is the hidden parameter, this C. It is active instance of the client, and you have to define the method for the client. The methods in Lua are defined with the colon, not with dot. Why? Because there are the hidden argument, the self. Self is the argument, the parameter for actual instance of the client. So this activate is called for the class instance. This C parameter is necessary correctly insert for each definition for key bindings, mouse bindings for all clients. It is difference against the global key bindings. There is nothing. There is no argument. So be careful with some copy paste the key bindings between global key bindings and the client key bindings. For example, here the personal client key bindings, there is definition of the key with super next and super prior, and in this case the util spawn is the calling some terminal shell scripts or applications. In this case the specific custom transparency is called. There is the example for some debug you can see that this combination, you can store the debug information about systray to the file, debug text file, and the result of system tray is stored to the file. For gamers, there is the Steam bug. Steam has the problem with Awesome. The Steam window is somehow moved to the right part. Yes, it is bug of Steam, and this is the correction of Steam window. So if you play with Steam, you have to insert this code here. Next, bigger section is the definition of specific rules. Specific rules are necessary for any tiling window manager. You can define, for example, for any dialogues, the dialogues window, to create strict command that all these windows will be shown as floating and centered. The function, this all next steps has to be defined for the callback. So rule is defined with ID, and there are two sections. Rule any. If any part of this section is accepted, the rule is activated. But there can be exceptions, and it is the third parameter here. Next are the outputs, the properties for any client. In this case, it is the floating attribute, and the callback, which is called before showing the window. Much more complex is this rule, ID floating. You can see that rule any can be combined with the instance, class of window, name, or role. There are many specific applications which are used. You can add your specific applications here, and in this case the floating and the center properties are called. There is very good example with Remina. I'm using the exact fixed layout, the size of the window. You can see the full HD size for Remina. If the Remina is shown, it will be in the center and the specific size of this application. Managed new client. If you are using, for example, WM or i3, there are the new client inserted to the slave, not to the master, in the master slave layout, of course. WM or Xmonad or i3, it is better to use this line where the new client will be inserted as a slave, not the master. The master is the default for Awesome. Title bars are disabled because I'm using nice component. Nice component is activated with super T. You can see here super T, the height it. If you want to use the default title bars, you have to uncomment this section, I have the default that all title bars are hidden. There is the specific thing. I have the connected signal to the Nocti component. If any notification is added to the list of all notifications, the notification is stored to the file Nocti history. After that, I can use this file for some tailing, yes, and to see the last notifications, or has just history. The next possibility is notification center super D, which shown here, and you can handle it too. I have two possibilities. The last part are just two things: the focusing of mouse. If I move the mouse between the clients, the activity of clients is activated with hovering with mouse. It is defined here, so mouse enter for the instance of the client is activated with mouse enter event. The last command is our autorun script. It is the last part. It is spawn with shell. Yes, there are next possibilities, but this script is handling the problem if the service is already started. Yes, so it is called just once. It is handled inside of this script. So we are finished, and now we can continue with theme.lua and the fishlive combination.